Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm just going to be doing a midnight race tier list. I was talking about this to a friend the other day, and I was thinking about it, and midnight, for those that haven't been keeping up, is getting an obsessive amount of pruning. And I think with the amount of pruning that they're doing, like with knockbacks, for example, which we'll get into later down the line, I think it's just like a buff to like some races later down the line. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, like, Kul Tiran, for example. So I feel like with the obsessive amount of pruning they're doing, like some races are gonna be way better in Midnight. So I thought I'd do a tier list on it. Do keep in mind this is from a PvP point of view. So with that, let's dive right into it. First things first is Dark Iron. Dark Iron, I feel like is just one of those things that is not really like getting a too indirect buff in Midnight, but it's more or less still the same as Live in my opinion. Dark Iron is pretty good. It removes, for those that don't know what Dark Iron does, I had to have this up as well. Dark Iron has Dungeon Delver, which who cares about that? Fireblood, which removes all poisons, disease, curse, and magic and bleed effects and increases your primary stat. So it's basically a burst ability as well as removes uh bleeds against like, ferals and rogues, which is pretty huge, or good against anything, against like magic and all that stuff. So Dark Iron has always been pretty good in that retrospect. This one also reduces damage taken from physical classes, and there's a lot of physical type stuff in the game, so that actually helps against melee, which is pretty nice. And then the other ones are not really very useful, but Fireblood and Forged Flance has always been pretty good, so that's the reason why I put it on S tier. It's definitely pretty good. Now, Dracthyr, in my opinion, is actually getting a buff in Midnight, and not buff because of their abilities, but buff in the fact that um you will it's one of the only things that's going to have a knockback. So for those that need a refresher on what Dracthyr does, they have Soar, nothing interesting. Principles of Soaring, not really all that interesting. Familiar Skies, nothing too fancy there. Awakened, you get mastery. Awakened is also, you get more mastery for the spec, so which is pretty nice. Discerning Eye increases your perception. Perception grants your ability to spot rare regions while gathering, not really impressive. Tail Swipe lashes out your tail in the air, knocking enemies in the air. And Wing Buffet. Okay, so this is the one I was talking about. So as many of you guys know, knockbacks is being pruned in Midnight. Hunters are losing it. Mages are losing it. Druids do keep it. I believe Elemental keeps it. But enhancements like losing it as well and stuff like that. But yeah, not that shamans can really be, Dracthyr anyways. But if you want a knockback on Hunter, you or Mage, you can go Dracthyr and have a knockback. So that's what I'm saying. I think Dracthyr is going to be getting a nice little, buff in case you want to have a knockback and get melee off you. Which, like I said, with the amount of pruning that has been going on in Midnight, I feel like this will be pretty dang nice. So, in my opinion, I think Dracthyr will be S tier for that reason, because just so many things are getting pruned on next expansion. Like, for example, here's some examples that come to mind. Hunter in general is losing Scatter Shot, Bursting Shot, Explosive Trap, unless they bring these back. Which, if they do, you can completely disregard this. But I'm not holding out hopes. But yeah, they're losing those, so you'll get trained probably a lot easier without having your knockbacks and stuff. So Dracthyr, you can knock them back. Shadow Priest is losing their stun, and I've done some duels on beta right now or alpha, whatever, and it was so unbelievably hard to get a melee off me. So I have a feeling that knockback will be really nice for that, considering the fact that we're losing our stun. Because right now, Shadow Priest only has their fear, and they have mind control, and they have a silence, which a silence isn't really going to necessarily help get a melee beating on your face. And then fear, they can just trinket that, and then you'll have to juke for mind control. So, but yeah, those are the only two things as far as that, for Shadow Priest. So having that knockback will definitely be pretty nice, even just to get a little bit of breathing room. And then the other one, which is Mage, I haven't made a Mage yet on Alpha, but from what I know they're losing their knockback. I think they lost displacement, and I know they lost I forget, my brain's fried at the moment, but they're losing that talent that makes their cooldowns come up a little bit quicker. Mage is just losing a bunch of stuff, so having that knockback will definitely help as well for Evoker as well, or Dracthyr as well, sorry. So this is the reason why I think Dracthyr has gone up with Midnight, is because the knockback will be pretty huge in my opinion, especially with the obsessive amount of pruning they've done. So that's the reason why I am putting Dracthyr on S tier. Now, up next is Draenei. This isn't really getting any buffs or anything, but however, I do think their abilities are pretty nice. For those that don't know what Draenei's is, it has Gift and Naru, which heals the target. Any self-heal is pretty nice in my opinion. So I think the heal is pretty nice. And then this also has a passive which increases your stats, so strength, agility, and intellect. So, you know, having extra stat buff is always pretty nice. So that's the reason why I think they're A tier. I don't think they're like, S tier or anything. But I think they're A tier. They're better than some of the other races in the game. Up next is Dwarves. For those that need a refresher on what Dwarves does, Frost Resistance, reduce frost damage taken, Might of Mountain, critical strike bonus damage and healing increased by 2%, and Stone Form, which is basically essentially the same thing as Dark Iron, except this one reduces physical damage taken by 10% for 8 seconds. I don't think it's as good as Dark Iron, so I'm gonna put it on A tier. I just don't think doors are bad, but they're just not worthy of being S tier. But this is one of the races that just doesn't, get an extra buff, like Dracthyr will, in my opinion, in Midnight. Now, Gnome, I think is going to be going up to S tier for melee specs. So stuff like Monk and especially Warrior, which if you play a Warrior right now, most of the time, like I've seen a lot of Warriors go Gnome anyways, just because that root break is so huge for Warrior. But I think the root break is going to be especially needed for more, because Warriors are losing their root break from Avatar, because Avatar I believe is gone as well. So, and a few other things. So that's why I think Gnome is pretty much getting a buff, and melee specs like Warrior and Monk will probably want it a lot more in Midnight. So I think Gnome is getting a buff similar to Dracthyr, or yeah, Dracthyr. Up next is Goblin. I actually think Goblin is also going to be a lot more wanted in Midnight as well, because their rocket jump. For those that don't know what their ability does, basically they have an ability called Rocket Jump, which launches you forward, and that's about really the only thing that's good for Goblin. Besides the fact that they do have a 1% haste increase, so if you want haste, haste is always nice as well. I know not a lot of people play Goblins, but Goblin, in my opinion, probably can move it up to like B tier. I don't think it's as strong as some of the other specs, but I do think it's gone up just because, like I said, with the obsessive amount of pruning, we're losing losing knockbacks and all these like interrupts. It's getting some changes as well. I do think having just that little bit of mobility boost that gets you forward, away from somebody, will drastically help out. Well, not drastically, but at least help out quite a bit. Similar to help Dracthyr is. I just don't think it's as strong as some of the other races in the game. But yeah, I do think Goblin's probably at least B tier. You could probably make a case for A tier, to be honest, as well. But yeah, I do think it's very, very strong coming into Midnight with how much pruning is going to be affecting the game. Alright, up next is Highmountain Tauren. So, funny enough, Highmountain Tauren has actually been getting more played on retail. It's not really getting like any changes or anything. I would say like maybe with High Mountain's um Bull Rush, right about here. Bull Rush, where you can charge forward and knock an enemy down, might be useful. But what a lot of people obviously are liking right now is the reduced damage taken, because you can take more reduced damage taken over time, and people have been testing it out on retail. So I do think this has actually gotten more people are playing it. So I'm not sure where to put this. I think either A or S tier, but we'll put it S tier because I feel like a lot more people are playing it right now. So I do think it'll be good, going into Midnight as well. Up next is Human. Human I still think it's probably going to be the same as it is now. It's not really like getting a buff or anything. It's still very much similar for those that need a refresher on what humans are. Removes all stun effects, and you gain more secondary stats. So haste, crit, mastery, versatility from all resources. So overall, their abilities are pretty good. I think they'll be S tier still in Midnight. Not much is really changing for them buff wise. Alright, up next is Kul Tiran. This one is one of the ones that I think is actually getting buffed in Midnight. Like I said before, similar to Dracthyr, knockbacks are being pruned, and Kul Tiran has always been one of my favorite races for Haymaker. For those that don't need a refresher on what Kul Tiran has, brush it off, increases your versatility, which is already pretty nice. Versatility is really nice for PvP. And then when you take damage, you heal for 2% over 4 seconds. So it's kind of similar to Highmountain a little bit, except this one heals, so that's pretty nice. And then Haymaker, like I said, is one of my most favorite abilities in the game. It not only does it knock somebody back, but it stuns them, so it can't unless they insta trinket. You can knock them off the cliff. I've done it. It's really powerful for classes like Death Knight, where you can just death grip somebody. Like in Blitz, I do that on my Death Knight quite often. And then, well, I don't have Kul Tiran on my DK, but back then when I was Kul Tiran on my DK, I would death grip somebody and then haymaker them off after I blinding sleeted them and took somebody out of the blitz. It was really, really huge. So it's going to be really strong on casters where you can save yourself by knocking somebody back, or you can use it on your rogue, for example, and sap them and then knock them off, or blind them, knock them off. DK, you can grip them, blinding sleet, and then knock them off, which is what I did. So overall, Kul Tiran, in my opinion, will be a pretty big buff in Midnight simply due to the fact that we are losing a lot of knockbacks in Midnight. Now for Lightforged Draenei. Lightforged Draenei, I don't think will be really that amazing in Midnight. I mean, they've never really had that many impressive abilities to begin with. For those that need a refresher on what it does, they have a 2.5-minute burst ability cooldown that does damage. They also have an ability that basically once they die, it does damage to somebody. And the only time that was ever really broken, in my opinion, was when BFA, when they were first made. Other than that, I don't really see Lightforged Draenei doing that good. We are getting a stat squish, so who knows? But there's definitely a lot better races out there. So I'll probably put them on B tier for now. Maybe make a case for C tier, but I think I'll put them on C tier. I just think goblins getting away would be more important to me. I would rather have a getaway more than just a regular damage ability. Because most of the time when Blizzard makes those kind of abilities, they just don't really do anything that useful. So that's the reason why I'm gonna put Lightforge on C tier. Up next, Mag'har. Mag'har, as many of you guys know, I've switched all my tunes to Mag'har. I love their burst. I've played it on the beta, and obviously the stat squish has changed it down. I'm not sure where to rank them right now. I think I'll put them down from S tier to A tier, because the one thing that makes Mag'har pretty good right now is their burst, and they did end up buffing it a while back. But other than that, there's not really like anything that's like useful. Like extra pet health increase is only really good for hunter, but you could play a normal orc for more damage increase for that. So and then reduce damage against poisons and diseases and curse, I guess, is nice, but it's nothing like impressive. So the main reason why I like Mag'har is their looks, but having that burst is really, really nice. So I think their burst will still be pretty good. So I'll put them on A tier pretty much for that reason. I'm a huge Mag'har fan, so but yeah, it's not like it's getting a buff or anything in Midnight, unlike Kul Tiran or Gnome or anything. Up next is Mechagnome. This one's like very rarely played. However, I think Mechagnome's actually not that bad. I've seen quite a few Mechagnomes, well, not quite a few. I've seen some Mechagnomes, and they do really well. Emergency failsafe, it's actually really good. Like I've seen some Mechagnomes, and this ability is actually really good. I actually think Mechagnome is actually pretty decent in my opinion. I would probably put them on S tier. I know nobody likes them, but they have some pretty good abilities compared to some other ones in the game. It's not really getting any buff in Midnight or anything, but personal opinion, if you can get past their looks, which I don't like Mechagnome myself, their abilities are definitely really, really good. Just because they just have some really decent ones. Uh, Night Elf, don't think this really needs to be said or anything. Night Elf Shadow Meld is not getting changed or anything. It's just always been the best for PvP. So, uh, it's not getting changed at all. For those that need a refresher, Shadow Meld is just too freaking good. It's always going to be good. They have some other good ones too, like reduced damage, nature damage taken for like druids, or Touch of a Loon, which increases your haste during the night, or critical strike during the day. You know, overall, they just Shadow Mode's is too good. It's the S tier. Nightborne, one of the worst in the game. Not surprising anybody. It's not really getting any buffs in Midnight, in my opinion. For those that need a refresher, increases magical damage dealt, so it's good if you're a caster. But there's some other races out there that you could just play that would be, in my opinion, way better. And then Arcane Pulse, 3-minute cooldown, and reduces their movement speed. So, I mean, reducing movement speed is great and all, but like, there's so many other classes that can have that has a slow anyway. So it's a 3-minute cooldown. It's like, really? And then reduces arcane damage taken, so it's good against like, you know, druids or um arcane mages. But overall, Nightborne is just like one of the worst in the game. So F tier for sure compared to like all the other races. Orc, I think, will be pretty nice in Midnight. I would say the change for them is the fact that CC is getting nerfed. So having that against stuns and stuff will be really nice. For those that need a refresher, Blood Fury, which increases your burst go, which is very nice. Command, which is damage is increased with pets. So, you know, I assume Unholy DK is also into that. But very good with Beast Mastery Hunters. And then, of course, hardness, which duration of stone effects reduced by 20%, which, again, CC is being nerfed in Midnight. So I actually think this will be really, really, really nice to be an orc in Midnight. So we'll have to see if the meta changes with that or not. Panda, I think Panda will be actually buffed as well in Midnight. Due to the fact that once again stuff is getting pruned and having an extra CC or a way to interrupt, I think it'll be very strong with Priest because, like I said, our stuff is getting pruned. So I think Panda will be very, very good for classes like Priest. So I think, yeah, we can put it on A tier. I think A tier is a good way to put it. So A tier will be pretty good. Just because, like I said, simply due to the fact that Quaking Palm is another way to CC or stop somebody, which, like I said, a lot of stuff is getting pruned. So I think this will be a buff to pandas. So I'll put them on A tier simply due to the fact of that reason. Tauren. Tauren, I think, might help out for some classes as well, simply due to the fact that, once again, stuff is getting pruned. So War Stomp will always be pretty nice. Simply, you could probably make a case for S tier, but I think A tier is a good spot just because it's not really useful in some classes that have a stun, like rogues. War Stomp will share DR with a stun, and you can only stun twice now before everybody goes immune. Paladins, you know, I don't say being useful for paladins. The only time I really would probably see something like really useful is if somebody needs that stun for, like, you know, stun into a cyclone, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. So I think it'll be a buff to some specs, but not everything. So that's why I'll put Tauren on A tier. Troll. For those that need a refresher on what Troll is, basically it gives you a little mini bloodlust every 3 minutes, so that is pretty nice. You also have reduced duration on movement and pairing effects, and stuff like that. But having a little mini haste is definitely nice, especially for classes that need it. And, you know, haste is always pretty nice. So I think Troll could be you can make a case for an S tier, but I think Troll is pretty good for A tier right now. It's not like it's getting a buff in Midnight or anything, but having that little mini bloodlust is always pretty nice for being a troll. So up next is Undead. Undead, kind of a tough one to place. I do think it's kind of similar to um other specs. I think it's getting a little bit of a buff in Midnight simply due to the fact that, once again, stuff is getting pruned. And I think a good example is Priest. Priest doesn't have a stun anymore. So, for example, if a priest on the Alliance fears an undead, they can just, you know, immune out of it. and then they won't have any ways to get the undead off you anymore because that's all they have right now. Because they don't have a stun anymore. They have a silence, and they have mind control, but that's basically it. So I'm not sure where to place undead. You could probably place it in B tier just because it's like a little bit of it. We'll put it at B tier. I don't think it's that huge of a buff just because it's like in certain specific situations. Not to mention, undead trinket or undead thing does share with the trinket, so. I do think Undead has gotten a little bit of buff in Midnight just because of the pruning, and Will the Forsaken will help out against classes like, especially with Warlock, and because I think Warlock's got a pretty big buff in Midnight as well, with Howl Terror not sharing with more coil anymore. So I think overall Undead will be good in Midnight. It's hard to say where I want to put it. I'm not sure entirely where I want to put it right now. But I think B tier is a good spot for now. Could probably make a case for A tier, but that's as far as I'm probably willing to go for that. Void Elf. Void Elf, I think will be definitely pretty good for casters going into midnight. Their teleport will be very useful, especially for something like priest. I think overall Void Elf is definitely going to be very strong for priest in general. I think the best races probably going probably for priest in general are probably going to be this like Dracthyr, Panda, or Void Elf, just because the mobility is huge, and also for those that don't know as well, um, you also get your damage and healing additional damage, as well as your spellcasts are not delayed when taking damage, which is pretty huge. So Void Elf is going to be very, very strong for casters. Not so much with melee, but yeah, I can see Void Elf being very, very powerful for priest, mages, especially with the knockbacks being removed. Devourer, Demon Hunter will probably be pretty good for Void Elf as well. Stuff like that. So I do think with the pruning, Void Elf has definitely gotten a buff in Midnight as well. All right, up next is Vulpera. Vulpera has not really gotten any buffs as well. Um, sorry. Uh, so yeah, it's nothing has really changed in that department. I don't think Vulpera is really that special either. It's similar to Lightforged, nothing like too fancy or anything. So I'm just gonna put it on C tier. It's not really that impressive. But you know, you probably make a case for D tier to be honest. So, but I'll leave it in C tier for now, just because I don't think it's. I think they're in a similar situation to Lightforged. Worgen. Worgen. For those that need a refresher, they have Dark Flight, which increases your movement speed for 40% for 10 seconds. One increases your critical strike, and then reduces your shadow and nature damage taken. Overall, I think Worgen's also kind of got a small buff in Midnight. I mean, more mobility is always really good. However, I don't think they're strong enough to beat the A tier ones. So, not to mention Dark Flight, you can still get slowed during that anyways. So, I think we'll put it on B tier for now. You could probably make a case for A tier, but I think personally B tier is a good sweet spot for them. However, I think with the pruning, Dark Flight's also going to be pretty nice to have in Midnight as well. Zandalari. One of them increases gives you a lower buff. Those not they do different stuff. I can't remember. I haven't played Zandalari in a while, but I think one of them is like crit, and I forgot what the other ones do. They also have a glider, but it's 15-minute cooldown, so ridiculous. So glider is always nice, and regeneration did get some changes as well. Regenerate 100% of your maximum health. And they haven't fixed it on this website yet, but it kind of changed as well. Overall, I'm not too impressed with Zandalari. I think it's also worth putting on C tier though. I think it's better than Lightforged and Vulpera. Having said that, you know what? We'll put it on B tier. I think it's better than Lightforged and Vulpera personally, but it's not really impressive or anything. Earthen. Personally, I actually don't think Earthen's that good. For those, actually, they don't have Earthen updated on here yet. But Earthen basically is similar in the Lightforged and Vulpera department. It's just its damage does not feel great. Speaking of which, you know what? I'm gonna put Vulpera on D tier as well. I just don't think Vulpera is as amazing as Lightforged either. I think Lightforged does more damage than Vulpera. But yeah, Lightforged, not Forge. Sorry. Earthen just there's a reason why nobody plays Earthen. Why play an Earthen when you can just play a Dark Iron or even a normal Dwarf is better than Earthen? The only reason we'd play Earthen would probably be to play a Dwarf on Horde, but that's pretty much it. I can't tell you the last time I've ever even seen an Earthen in game. But yeah, their abilities are just not that good, and they're not changing in the war or in Midnight. It's just not that amazing in my opinion. And last but not least is a Blood Elf. For those that need a refresher on what Blood Elf is, basically increase critical strike chance, reduce arcane damage taken, and one of them is a 2-minute purge. But honestly, I find the purge so useless sometimes. I can't tell you how many times whether it be on like Shaman, where purge just never wants to purge the one thing you want, and by the time you finally purge it, it it's gone. You know, it was useless. So I feel like purge just is not that good. However, sometimes it can be useful, so I'll put it in C tier, similar to Lightforged Draenei. Not like it's getting a buff similar to Midnight. No, in Midnight, similar to the other specs, but yeah. Overall, this is my current opinion on the races in Midnight. Let me know if you guys disagree or agree with me on some of these changes. I did not put the new race on the tier list because they're not. I was not able to test it yet. But overall, I'm thinking it's gonna be similar to like Forged Draenei anyway. So I don't think the new race will be that good anyways. If I'm being honest. So for those that are curious, but once I test it, I'll let you guys know. But yeah, this is my thoughts on the new races. Well, the new what I think about races in Midnight with the pruning and all that stuff. So let me know what you guys think. That's it. See you guys later.